Hey gals, welcome back to my channel where I help women like you grow and monetize their podcast. What's one of the hardest things about growing a podcast? Yeah, discoverability. Having new people find you in order to grow your podcast audience. Reaching a new audience consistently. Directories and other tools you have to promote your show aren't that good at helping people discover indie podcasts. Yes, I said indie. Don't you dare call my podcast unpopular. I'll accept alternative, up and coming, or out of the ordinary. You might be surprised to find that there are platforms where discoverability is actually by design much easier. These are platforms like good old trusted Google search, YouTube, and the indie pick of the group, Pinterest. Since most of us are already recording our podcast on platforms that also record video, just one small upside of the pan-demi was that we had way more ways to record video remotely. It makes sense that when you ask how to grow your podcast, you'll wonder immediately, should I put my podcast on YouTube? Not only am I clearing up the confusion of understanding audio versus video podcasting and where you should put your time, but be sure to stick around to the end of this video for my bonus tip, as well as the Waves podcast checklist that will help you on your way to finding new audiences through video podcasting. If you're new here, I'm Lauren Popish, founder of The Wave. The Wave helps women grow and monetize their podcast. You might consider me the Alexis Rose of podcasting. I see everything as possible, and my optimism towards you achieving your dreams is matched only by my belief in your ongoing potential. I'm going to use all my skills to give you the helping hand you need to get where you were always destined to be. Personal theme song not included. I release weekly videos on the subjects of crafting, producing, growing, and monetizing your podcast. So if that sounds useful, be sure to subscribe to our channel by hitting the subscribe button in the lower right, and be sure to hit the bell so you can get notified every time we have a new episode. So seriously, should I put my podcast on YouTube? Knowing what you know about YouTube and that it's better at helping people discover your show, podcast or otherwise, you might think the obvious answer is yes, of course. It's a no-brainer to whack my podcast up there too. It also costs me nothing. Sorry, what's the question again? But it's not exactly that simple. YouTube, although not as spoken about as other platforms, I see you TikTok knowing things about me before I even realize them. It has its own algorithms and rules that dictates how it features your content. If you're building a YouTube channel with audio first, you actually might be hurting your discoverability on YouTube. Hear me out. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to this question, so it's important to weigh up all the factors I've lovingly prepared for you below before you make your decision. YouTube's algorithm has the power for one video to reach millions of people thanks to search engines and other people's videos pushing viewers to yours afterwards. But if you haven't released a video that will keep them watching once they arrive, there's huge wasted potential. Here are the things to consider before launching a podcast on YouTube. Number 1, first of all, do you know what works on YouTube? The same content that people enjoy listening to on audio platforms isn't the same as what they want to watch on video platforms. The average YouTube video is about 10 minutes long, while the average podcast length is about 30 minutes long. There's a significant difference you have to take into consideration before putting your podcast on YouTube. The question you might have to ask yourself about every segment in each episode is this: how important is it? What can be cut? What makes the most sense to keep while keeping my episode digestible and punchy? If you want the whole episode, nothing trimmed down on YouTube, put yourself in the shoes of your audience and ask, why would I sit and watch this video when I lead such a busy life? I have so much content pulling at me in different directions, and I also need to feed the cat, get groceries, return a box to FedEx, ride my bike, do the dishes, water the plants. You get it. Why would you sit and watch when you could just listen on the go? If you want someone to answer that question with something like, because it's far more exciting than listening, then you have to put in the work to make it that exciting. It's not as simple as uploading your audio with a still image of your cover art. You might have exported an MP4, but that's not a video, my friend. Again, they could go to their podcast app of choice and listen while also riding home on the bus from work. Optimizing your channel and each video release will be an important part of being successful. If you want people to want to consume your podcast in video format, you'll need to think about how to make it visually compelling. Can you add fun and dynamic graphics, giving them visual aspects missed in audio? Can you be dressed in a way that matches the brand or the theme of your episode? How can you break up the video with different camera angles and B-roll or bloopers even? Can you make it interactive and pull people in by looking directly at the camera and asking the audience a question that maybe you want them to answer in the comments? Now, you might be wondering, what about my audio-only listeners? Will a video version of my podcast mean that my audio listeners drop off? As long as you don't exclude your audio-only listeners by referencing things that can only be understood through watching, you shouldn't have to worry about fewer listeners on Apple or Spotify. There will always be people too busy to watch the video, no matter how hard you try to make it entertaining. One of my favorite podcasts releases a video version a day early on their Patreon, which I'm a member of, and I've never once watched the video version. Don't let that discourage you. It's just not for me. But there are thousands of people who stream it that way every single week. If you're releasing video, just make sure to cater to both kinds of listeners and double your audience as a result. Number 2. So now that you know what works on YouTube, the next question is, do you have the time? Knowing that you'll likely have to cut down your episode and that video editing is time consuming. Remember the edits and bloopers and graphics and multiple camera angles and those sound effects I mentioned earlier. Other things you'll need time for are adding elements like closed captioning or generating transcripts, title cards, end cards, and credits. YouTube requires that you upload a thumbnail graphic that accompanies every video. You might even need to shop every week for a new spooky costume for your Urban Legends podcast. There will likely come a time when AI magically edits our videos for us, but until then, the video production process takes a lot longer than audio-only episodes. Choosing whether to incorporate this into your show means weighing up time spent and benefits gained. Luckily, the wave editing is one option for hiring a team to do the heavy lifting of video podcast editing for you. Check out more in the description to learn more. Number 3. This brings me to the next point. Not only is your safari look for your travel podcast going to be time-consuming to get into, but it's also going to cost you money. Next week, you're covering Paris? Berets and croissants don't come cheap, my friend. Aside from any fun visual aspects you might want to bring to your look to enhance the video experience, you're also likely going to need production help for your video podcast. You can't do it all by yourself. That video editing I spoke about, the stuff that'll take you hours, it can actually take you no time at all when you hire someone else to do it, but it is going to cost you money. Number 4, lastly, do you have the energy? Every episode will now need optimal lighting and getting into hair, makeup, and wardrobe. Even if you don't have a costume involved, you're still going to want to be camera ready. When you record audio only, you can roll up in your sweats if you want to, but I won't judge. The production of video recording requires a lot more setup and pack down, potentially adding hours, not just to the editing that I mentioned, but also to the recording time you need to set aside. Do you have it in you to produce your video podcast consistently? Because despite having the potential to reach a wider audience, a video podcast that releases with the consistency of a mood ring isn't going to get you the results you want either. Time for my bonus tip. With all that being said, if you have the bandwidth, video podcasting on YouTube can be a great way to grow your audience, thanks to that discoverability thing I was talking about. But most people will be more successful picking one medium, mastering it, and producing it consistently over a period of months and years. Be the master of what you do and do it well, rather than trying to bite off more than you can chew. Yep, sometimes my bonus tip is just a really obvious thought nugget. You're welcome. But if you are someone who has what it takes to start a video podcast, then I have something special for you. I've created the ultimate checklist for optimizing your video podcast on YouTube. It includes tips for the right titles, descriptions, and thumbnails, all of this can be found in this free little guide. Download it now from the description. Okay, let's review what we discussed. Know what works on YouTube and be willing to deliver that perfect recipe so you don't waste your time putting out something that no one wants to engage with. Make sure you have the time. Producing video content for your podcast adds hours and maybe even days to the process. So do you have that time up your sleeve? Can you afford it? Even the most low-budget video productions require editing, lighting, and a good camera as the bare minimum. Not to mention your time has value too, and it costs something. Have you got the energy? This whole thing is a lot of work, and while the results may be worth it, you need to make sure they outweigh the effort you need to put into it to make it work. Make sure you have the time to sleep, eat, and play as well, okay? And for that bonus tip, quality, not quantity, is the key to success. Pick one medium and master it. YouTube can be a fantastic tool for getting your podcast discovered in a way that's just not possible on a lot of other traditional podcast platforms. This much is true, but in order to be successful in that, there's a lot of hard work involved. If you can do it, I say without a doubt, go for it. If not, stick to what you know you can deliver to the standard that your audience deserves, and always stick to a workload that you know you can manage. This is your dream. Don't make it stressful or a stretch. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on those notifications, and if you've got questions, throw them in the comment section below, or let me know about other podcast-related topics you'd like to hear about. See? I know some things about YouTube, right? Until next time, thanks for watching, keep podcasting, and enjoy the ride.